sing that tune. Catch a Dylan song or some eclipse of the moon.
But up next, following the various appointments by newly elected President Donald Trump, his cabinet is one of the richest in White House history. In fact, not since Herbert Hoover back in 1929 has there been a cabinet this reliant on wealthy people. And many folks, including my next guest, are referring to what's been happening in Washington as the Velvet Coup. We're pleased to be joined on the telephone by author and political activist Jill Cody. She is, in fact, the author of America Abandoned, the secret velvet coup that cost us our democracy. And she joins us on the telephone. Good evening to you.
Hi, John. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners.
Appreciate you joining us tonight. This term velvet coup, which is part of the title of your book, define what you mean by that.
Well, what I mean by that is several years ago I facilitated a meeting on information literacy in Prague. And the Czech Republic was able to break away from the Soviet Union without a shot being fired, and they called it their Velvet Revolution. Mm-hmm. That was a positive thing, but I'm using the word velvet because we've had a coup without a shot being fired.
Mm-hmm. The term velvet obviously means something totally different from a coup. Velvet, as you say, was something that led to a coup without any violence. Yet a coup, nonetheless, has connotations and represents, perhaps in this case not violent, but in most cases, a violent takeover of a government or a country.
Mm-hmm. That's why the adjective velvet's in front, because it's been smooth. Mm-hmm. A coup is normally thought of as a violent takeover, but what happened in the Czech Republic and here is that it's been smooth. It's been a long game. It's happened over several decades, and I believe, in my view, that the launch happened on August 23rd, 1971. Mm-hmm. With a memo that was written by a corporate attorney named Lewis Powell that was sent to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And he basically told corporations and CEOs if they didn't get involved in politics, that they were part of their own demise and destruction. So back in 1971, there were 175 lobbyists. Today, there are 13,000 lobbyists that are there to make sure the corporations and the billionaires' interests are listened to.
So basically this has been a long-term plan, as you say, started back in 1971. Why has the American people and the voting public not caught wind of this?
Yes, well, because it happened so slowly. Do you know the analogy of the frog in the pot, where the waters turned up slowly, and then before you know it, it's boiling? Well, I think we've all been that frog. Things have happened slowly. Since 1970, Lewis Powell wrote that memo, and then he got onto the U.S. Supreme Court. And in the 70s, there was a Supreme Court decision called Buckley versus Valeo that gave money constitutional rights to free speech. So that right there made money have the ability to talk, and if you have whoever has the most money has the most ability. Then 2 years later, with Powell still on the court, Boston v. Bellotti, that decision gave free speech rights to corporations. So things just kept going through the decades. Very slowly, things were tightening up, the demonization of regulations, because regulations get in the way of making maximum profit. And, in the 90s, they repealed the Glass-Steagall Act, which was a 70-year act that protected people from banks using their savings and checking accounts for investment purposes, but then that was repealed, and then we got the Wall Street theft in the 2000s. And then in the 2010s, we got Citizens United, that allowed corporations. And remember, corporations already have the ability to spend their money, and money has free speech rights, and now corporations could spend it on election campaigns. And then the next one, McCutcheon versus the FEC, gave the right for billionaires to spend as much money on elections. So these things immediately vaulted them over the middle class. But they're slow, over 4 decades. But in my view, I think with the Trump, matter of fact, I even wrote in my book that if a billionaire ever became president, the coup would be completed. Mm-hmm. And that's my belief with the Trump election. And the people he's appointing to the cabinet are the richest, as you mentioned, are the richest that we've had for decades.
Now, Mr. Trump was elected, of course, on the platform of making America great again. As I indicated off the top, this is one of the richest cabinets in White House history. Is it possible for them to do that and have this inequality when it comes to wealth?
Well, it's interesting about that slogan, and I call it sloganeering. You make this slogan and you put it on a hat. And people then in their own mind can define what's great and not really ask what's behind that. Because what people wanted were more jobs. And then immediately, even though with marching and a resistance, he resigned, but the first thing he does is appoint a labor secretary that was annoyed by employees and preferred robots. So the idea that he was going to bring jobs back, but maybe with this next person, Acosta, he might. But it's just a slogan. There's nothing behind it. Mm-hmm. What's really behind it is his actions. And as you see with these appointments, I don't think he's draining any swamp, and that was another slogan. It looks like, he's putting the alligators in, especially with someone who worked 17 years with Goldman Sachs as Secretary of Treasury.
You're with KW Magazine on FM 98.5 CKWR. Our guest is Jill Cody. She's an author and a political activist. She is the author of America Abandoned, the secret velvet coup that cost us our democracy. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with a Canadian politician. In fact, she's Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Her name is Chrystia Freeland. She wrote a book back a few years ago that was an award-winning book called Plutocrats, the rise of the new global super rich and the fall of everyone else in 2012. And she uses a term called that she refers to as crony capitalism. Is that appropriate, and does it apply to what's happening in Washington these days?
Absolutely. I think she wrote a excellent, astounding book. I have it. I've read it, and this is definitely crony capitalism. These are the people that are on the inside. These are the elite of the elites. And when you put somebody in head of education like Betsy DeVos, who has over $5 billion, the total reason is to be able to privatize our public education system so that more cronies can profit from the education in this country. So I completely agree with her. It is crony capitalism. Those who are at the top and appoint their own and their own elite, and yet they demonize the word elite as if professors are elite or people of science are elite. But these truly are the elite people.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the figures, if you were to specifically identify some of the members of cabinet or some of the executives that Mr. Trump has appointed? Who would be at the top of your list?
Yes. Well, the one that is really striking to me is the one he appointed for the Food and Drug Administration chairman, Jim O'Neill. He's a free market zealot who doesn't think there should be any clinical trials, that the new drug should be directly released to the public and let the free market work it out. Now, what does that mean? How many people have to die because a drug didn't go through any clinical trials before we decide that it doesn't work. And he also believes in seasteading and is funded by Peter Thiel, a multi-billionaire, and to create libertarian cities out in the ocean. So that's our FDA chair, who doesn't thinks that medicine should just, or drugs should just be released to the public and let them use it, and then we see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
That's very scary. The other thing another person that's very scary, other than the Secretary of Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, who was known as the foreclosure king, and but to move on, we all know about that, is the one that really is very scary is the FCC chairman, the Federal Communications Commission, Ajit Pai. He's a Verizon lobbyist. So a lobbyist now is head of the very department that he's supposed to direct,
mm-hmm.
and he's very opposed to a neutral net. He actually proclaimed that under Trump, the days of a neutral or a net neutrality are numbered, and he wants to take, quote-unquote, a weed whacker to regulations in the FCC, and he's already, through his memos, reduced and decreased the Internet's Lifeline program to lower-income citizens. So what's going to happen now with our Internet is it'll turn into a profit-making source like a cable company. People who can afford more will get the faster service. People who can't will get slow service. They may even decide what kind of websites that we're able to see and visit. So that's also a very frightening one.
Indeed. Now, I have about a minute or two left. If we look at what has been happening and the fact, for instance, that you have a very divided country, roughly down the middle in terms of support for Mr. Trump, what can the average citizen do to reverse the direction of what you're suggesting is happening?
Yes, that's a great question. First, I'd like to comment that part of the coup has been to divide and conquer, meaning to have Republicans and Democrats fight each other and divide us. So we have successfully, over 40 years, they have successfully divided us pretty much 50-50. And it's very hard for Democrats to talk to Republicans or vice versa. And that's been by design because you demonize taxes, you demonize everything, and then they can play and steal all the money. But what people can do, at least on the progressive Democratic side, is do what they did that got the labor secretary to resign. People are out in the streets by hundreds of thousands right now. People are protesting and getting to their representatives' offices and making them accountable. And then, blowing up the phones is what they call it when they crash the switchboard. You call up your representative. You explain to them what's on your mind and what you need them to do. Or you send postcards getting a message, because letters still go through the anthrax process, and the postcard goes straight through. People can use freefax.com and get their message through. But all of these have an impression, because one representative said, if I got 10 calls, I really listen. But if they get 1,000 calls, they are stunned. So I think that making yourself be heard and not be apathetic anymore. And really, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, that's a good, what I call peak citizen activity, is to make sure that you're part of the political process.
Are you confident that this velvet coup, as you refer to, can be stopped?
Oh boy, that's even a better question. I think we have an opportunity to recapture our democracy because I firmly believe it's been stolen by the billionaires and corporations. But I think it's going to take all of us. I think it's going to take everybody who understands what democracy is in a democratic republic to want to be able to have a free press and to want to protect our vote, because voter suppression is an increasingly bad problem in this country. And I think it's going to take all of us to do what we need to do to recapture our democracy. So we have to wait and see.
Jill, good of you to join us tonight. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much, and thank you to your listeners.
Not at all. All the best to you. Jill Cody is a political activist and an author. The book is titled America Abandoned, The Secret Velvet Coup That Cost Us Our Democracy. KW Magazine on FM 98.5 CKWR.